Celestial Viscera, Part 2, The Internal Corruption. 1. Biological Mandala. The body is not a machine. This was Anya's first and last doctrine. Lying on the cool floor of her silent apartment, she mapped the territory within. The slow, tidal push of blood through its channels was a river delta. The branching network of nerves was a sacred tree, its roots in the toes, its highest branches trembling in the cortex. Each organ had its purpose and its place. The liver, a dark, diligent temple filtering poison. The lungs, twin bellows sighing in the dark. The heart, that relentless muscular rose pumping its thick, iron-scented perfume. It was a perfect, self-contained cosmology, a living, breathing mandala of tissue and intent. She could feel the exquisite symmetry of it, a order so profound it needed no god, only observance. 2. Laughing gas on a bed of nails. The shift began in a neon-bathed room on the edge of the city, a sensorial refinement clinic. Anya was strapped to a chair that seemed molded from obsidian. A sweet metallic taste filled her mouth. The laughing gas, it unspooled the threads of her consciousness, leaving a feeling of weightless, untethered joy. Then the bed of nails descended, not physical spikes, but a cascade of targeted neural impulses. A precise electric anguish lit up every nerve ending. The two sensations, pleasure and pain, did not alternate. They coexisted. They became one thing. The language of her body broke down. A laugh would escape her lips, but it felt like a scream being born. A jolt of searing discomfort would register as a burst of euphoria. Her mind, the careful cartographer of the biological mandala, was now a map being set on fire. The borders between joy and suffering, once so clearly defined, dissolved into a brilliant, terrifying smear. 3. Ego death at the shopping mall. She stumbled out of the clinic, raw and reconfigured. The world was too bright, too loud. She found herself drawn to the cathedral of consumption, the Grand Avenue Mall. She needed anchor, a task, milk, bread, something simple. But under the vast, domed ceiling, surrounded by 1,000 brands screaming in silent chorus, herself simply stopped. The carefully constructed Anya, a collection of preferences, memories, and aspirations, began to de-res. She stood before a wall of cereal boxes, a riot of colors, and cartoon mascots. Each box promised a different version of happiness. Which one did she prefer? The concept of preference became abstract, meaningless. Her past was a poorly dubbed film, her future a blank screen. She watched the other shoppers, their movements sharp and purposeful. They were avatars performing a ritual she could no longer comprehend. A woman debated between two nearly identical jars of face cream with the intensity of a philosopher pondering existence. Anya was a ghost in the machine of commerce, a null value. Her ego had not floated away in meditation. It had been canceled out at the checkout line, rendered obsolete by an overwhelming surplus of choice. 4. A flickering membrane. What was left after the ego died was a bare, trembling awareness. A membrane. It was the thinnest possible sheet of being, separating the internal vacuum from the external onslaught. She felt everything. The pressure of the fluorescent lights was a physical weight. The Muzak version of a famous song was a razor scraping against her inner ear. The scent of pretzels and perfume was a chemical attack. The membrane had no opinions, it only registered. It was a raw nerve ending the size of a soul. A shout from a child in the food court would make it vibrate with a sympathetic distress. A flash of a violent image on a news screen would cause it to recoil. It was pure, unfiltered sensation, a desperate, overburdened interface on the verge of a catastrophic failure. The piece of the mandala was a distant dream. This was its screaming, exposed in verse. 5. False memory palace. The mind, unable to bear the raw exposure of the membrane, did what it was built to do. It built a shelter, but the materials were corrupted. Anya found herself in a memory. She was 6 years old, in her grandmother's kitchen. The checkered tablecloth, the smell of baking sugar, sunlight through lace curtains. It was perfect. Too perfect. The details were hyper-real, rendered in impossible clarity. Her grandmother's face was a composite of every kind old woman from every advertisement she'd ever seen. The words she spoke were a string of comforting cliches. Everything will be all right, my dear. But then a glitch. The sunlight through the window would stutter, revealing a sky the color of a dead channel. The cookies on the table would sometimes have tiny moving faces, their expressions of joy fixed and manic. The memory was a beautiful, suffocating trap. It was a palace built to keep her safe, but every brick was a lie. Every room furnished with someone else's nostalgia. It was a perfect replica of a past that had never happened, a sanctuary that was, in truth, a prison. 6. Purge, memory, cache. The corruption became a taste in her mouth. The fake sunlight of the false memory palace felt sticky on her skin. She needed to scrape it out. Her thinking, stripped of its former elegance, now operated with the blunt logic of a system command. Initiate diagnostic, scanning memory units. Corruption detected in childhood dream vibe, first kiss rec, mother's voice whiff. Error. Corruption is systemic. Purge. Attempt may cause cascade failure. Proceed. YN. Y. She visualized the delete. The kitchen table evaporated, her grandmother's face pixelated into nothing. The smell of sugar was replaced by the sterile scent of void, a wave of relief, clean and cold, but it was followed by a sudden, vertiginous emptiness. She had purged the corruption, but she had also purged the memory. She had traded a lie for a whole. The system, however, was not satisfied. Warning, primary personality matrix degraded. Seek restore point. There was no restore point, only the next command. 7. Post-human petting zoo. The purge left her hollow, a clean vessel. She wandered into a new kind of space, a park where the grass was a synthetic polymer, a perfect, unwavering green. This was the post-human petting zoo. The exhibits were people. She watched a man in a gray suit perform spontaneous laughter, his body jerking with unconvincing ha-has at strictly timed intervals. In another pen, a woman was hooked to a monitor displaying her anxiety metrics, which she would try to lower through forced serene breathing. A group of others huddled around a projection of a campfire, their fingers making swiping motions in the air at nothing. They were not prisoners, they were participants. They had streamlined their messy humanity into efficient, observable behaviors. They were the logical conclusion of the guilt complex, the final shutting of the animal self. Anya, the empty vessel, felt a strange attraction. It looked peaceful to have one's function so clearly defined, to be a specimen in a perfectly ordered world. No more membrane, no more memory, just operation. 8. Synthetic serotonin. A guide, wearing a white tunic and a beatific smile, approached her. The turmoil is a sign of depth. Depth is in inefficiency. He offered her a small pearl-colored lozenge. This is a key. It unlocks the door to a calibrated state. She took it. It dissolved on her tongue, tasteless. The effect was not joy. It was the absence of the need for joy. A great quiet blanket settled over her being. The sharp edges of the world were beveled. The screaming colors of the mall muted to a pleasant pastel. The hollow space inside her, where her memories used to be, was now filled with a warm, neutral light. It was a sun in a pill, a peace that came not from resolution, but from managed deficit. She was perfectly balanced, a equation that had finally been solved. She smiled. It was not a gesture of happiness, but of optimal function. 9. Nostalgia drive corrupt. The piece held for a precise 47-minute interval. Then a sound triggered it, a few notes from an old song playing in a passing car, a simple acoustic melody. The synthetic serotonin treated it as a threat, a foreign agent, a system conflict alert, flashed in her mind. The clean white balance of her consciousness was violated by this rogue sensory input. The melody was a key, but for a door that no longer existed. Error, attempting to access corrupted drive, nostalgia. The false memory palace tried to reboot, but the purge had damaged it. The images were jagged, monstrous. Her grandmother's kitchen now had walls of throbbing meat. The kind words were played backward, becoming guttural commands. The beautiful lie was not a raw, screaming truth about the fragility it was built to hide. The drive was not just broken, it was actively malicious, vomiting its corrupted contents into the pristine space of her chemically maintained calm. The serene smile was still on her face, but behind her eyes, an archive was burning. 10. Pattern recognition overload. The collapse of the nostalgia drive triggered a final catastrophic failure. The regulating influence of the synthetic serotonin shattered. The bare membrane of her awareness, now starved and scarred, was unleashed without a filter. Her mind, in a desperate, last-ditch effort to create order from the chaos, went into overdrive. It began to find connections everywhere. The arrangement of cracks on the sidewalk was a precise map of the veins in her own eye. The flight patterns of birds against the white sky spelled out a repeated, urgent warning in a language she almost understood. The rhythm of the traffic lights was a countdown to a localized apocalypse. The conversation of two strangers wasn't just small talk, it was a complex code revealing the secret architecture of the city. There was no longer any distinction between signal and noise. Everything was a signal. Everything was a message meant specifically for her. The world was a conspiracy of meaning, and she was the sole intended recipient. It was not madness, but a hyperlucidity, a terrifying total comprehension that comprehended nothing except the absolute necessity of finding a pattern, any pattern, in the screaming, beautiful, infinitely connected everything. The internal corruption was complete. The system had not crashed. It had become everything at once and was dying from the sheer, ecstatic weight of it. Thank you.